Natasha, welcome everyone. It's an absolute pleasure for me tonight to receive Lilianne. I wrote to her after I finished the book because I could not put it down. So I highly recommend it to absolutely everyone. I had to force myself to stop reading so I could keep a little bit of the book for the next day, but otherwise I would have spent the night reading it. So I really kept, maybe the last two chapters, three chapters, because I wanted it never to finish. So it's a gem. It's a delight to read. It's one of the. I told Lilianne and that I compared her for the sensuality of her writing to an author I really love, who is none other than Lawrence Durrell. I'm sure most of you have heard of him, and I've read maybe some of his prose or some of his poetry. Of course, you probably have seen the Durrells of Corfu as well, but really reading Lawrence Durrell is another experience. And is amazing. And that is, for me, that was that's the nicest surprise of this month of January, which has been dreary and ongoing as well. So, and I was fascinated by the subject. I absolutely loved the painting when I first saw it, not long time ago actually, at the Musée d'Orsay, for multiple reasons that we will touch when we get into the Q&A. But really, I really recommend you reading this book. This is a fabulous read. So please do so. So I will introduce Lilianne now. Lilianne Milgrom is an internationally acclaimed artist and author. She was born in Paris, grew up in Australia, lived in Israel, and now lives in the United States in the greater Washington, D.C. region. She exhibits her artwork in regional and international galleries and museums, and you can also find her artwork in both private and institutional collections. Articles have appeared in publications such as the Huffington Post, Bonjour Paris, Inspirel, Ceramics Monthly, and Daily Art Magazine. And her essay, Je suis femme, appears in the Dans le ventre des femmes anthology. In 2011, she became the first artist authorized by the Orsay Museum in Paris to copy Gustave Courbet' infamous L'origine du monde. That's an achievement in itself, already being the first one, the origin of the world. Following her stint as a copyist, she spent nearly a decade researching and writing her debut novel, L'origine, awarded the 2020 BRAG Bragg Medallion. Welcome, Lilianne.
Merci beaucoup. I don't know what to do with that fantastic introduction. It is just, when a reader connects with your book or with your art, I think there is nothing equals that. It's the most fantastic feeling. And so you were my absolute ultimate type of reader. And when you write a book, they tell you that you should write a book with a person in mind. And I guess you were exactly that person, because otherwise you don't know, you have to have someone in your head, like who you're writing for, the type of person. And so you were the perfect person. So thank you very much. And Lawrence Durrell, ooh la la, thank you very much. So it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for hosting me.
Mm. So, Lilianne, you have moved around quite a lot, and it's nice to meet somebody who has been living in different countries and experiencing different life. Every time we move to a country, it's a different life altogether, and a different chance at also understanding the world through the eyes of art, I believe. So, how did you wind up back in Paris in 2017 after being born there?
So what's so interesting is exactly like you say, when you live for really long periods of time in any particular place, you absorb that culture, you absorb the mindset and the worldview of that place. And even though I left Paris when I was only 6, I guess the DNA just gets into your bones and it's still there. And so I was returning to Paris a lot whenever I could, but sort of more for nostalgic purposes. But I always dreamed about returning to Paris and being able to do some art in Paris, and not just for when I'm on vacation doing a little watercolor. I really always had this dream of like being an artist in Paris. Never had the opportunity. And then I said, no, I was starting to develop a series of works in my studio about sexuality and aging. And I wasn't getting anywhere. I was frustrated. And I thought, okay, I've got to go to Paris and do this. But how do you get to Paris for a couple of months? You know, it's not an easy thing and it's expensive. And so in the book, I say how it's all very serendipitous, what happened to me. And I got an incredible opportunity to go there for 2 months. And I thought, okay, I had no idea what I was going to do. And I sort of bumped into Gustave Courbet's L'Origine du Monde practically on the second day I was there. And the rest is history. I don't hear you, Sarah.
I may have muted myself without realizing that. So tell us about this painting, L'Origine du Monde. Aside from its previous owners, you who obviously had each of them the occasion to look at it, you know, closely, intensely, but basically, apart from the owners, you're the one who probably have spent more intense time in the presence of the painting more than anyone else in living history. I mean, you know, including us, because we go to the museum. I mean, I spent 15 minutes, okay, in front of that painting. So because I had heard about it, but I had no idea really, you know, from the title and everything. So reading your book and reading how you became the copyist for the book, I'm thinking you've spent more time than anyone else, apart from those who owned it, in front of the painting.
You know, it's a very, for some people, 1 minute is too much in front of that painting. And it's a very intense painting. You can't really walk away from it without having some sort of emotion. You just can't. It's just really in your face. It's very powerful. And when I got permission from the Musée d'Orsay to become the copyist, so they gave me 6 weeks, okay? So every day I would turn up. It was a job, and I would turn up and I would spend hours in front of this painting, recreating it. It was quite an experience. And, you know, people say, well, what did you think of it first, when you first saw it? Because it's a painting that has a lot of contradictions. Some people can love it, some people can hate it. Some people see a Madonna there, some people see a prostitute, some people see their mother, some people are reminded of giving birth. There's a whole gamut of what people, you know, think about that painting. And there's this one British historian that saw the painting and he described his emotions, and that's exactly how I felt. He said something like, it was a swirl of fascination, aversion, liberation, and embarrassment, like all together. I think those adjectives is exactly what I felt when I first saw it. So anyway, something just propelled me to become its copyist, and I managed to get, that's all in the book. It's kind of a amusing anecdotes about how I became a copyist. And I think if Natasha can start showing, I want to show you a few of the photographs of me as a copyist, because I'll share some interesting anecdotes here. So this was, I think, on the second day. And, you know, I always say, like, if you can't draw properly, then the entire painting is not going to work. So doing the underpainting and the charcoal sketch, that took me quite a while. And it's a very complex sort of, if you can see the painting, when you have something in that sort of position, it's a very difficult nude study from that angle. So that took quite a while. So you can go on to the next one, Natasha. So as you can see, I didn't have a lot of privacy when you're painting. And I am the sort of person that even in my studio at home, if anyone walks into my studio, I go, what do you want? You know, like, I need total silence, total concentration. And here I was painting this very, very provocative painting in public. And I very quickly realized it was actually more of a sort of a performance art, because I was interacting with the museum goers. as well as trying to recreate this painting. So let's move on to the next one. Natasha. Okay, so you can see that I had some pretty intense, you can see the painting is coming along quite nicely there, the copy, but I had some very intense conversations with people. And a lot of people said, you know, you're very brave and this and that. I didn't think of being brave when I first saw it. I was so fascinated by the image itself. Like, you know, how awesome was that? Like Gustave Courbet in 1866 painted this painting, and admittedly it was for a private commission, okay? But still, he broke all the taboos for centuries where this part of a woman's anatomy just was not permitted. And he was a realist painter, and it was his religion. Realism was really his religion. And he said, no, I'm going to paint this exactly like that. And he is known for painting flesh just so beautifully that as a painter myself, I was also drawn to the way he painted. So it was really interesting. It was a mix of talking to the public and painting. It was an incredible experience. I think, can we do the next slide? So again, you can see, you know, people have said, would you do it again? And I'm not sure I would. It was sort of one of those grab the moment things. It was really very difficult to have people looking at what I was doing. It was one of those unforgettable experiences. It really changed me and changed my art in a sense. Let's go on to the next one. Okay, and you can see people, you know, photographing, and okay, we'll go to the next one. So this is not in my book, but I thought I would give this anecdote. So when I was in Paris doing this at the time, the expert on l'origine du monde is the famous French historian Thierry Savatier. Do you know him, Sarah?
I've heard of his name, yeah.
Yeah. So he came up and he had this theory, or he was told by gynecologists that she was pregnant, that this looked like a woman who was pregnant at the time. And so I was painting, and this gentleman taps me on the shoulder, and he, in very, very bad English with a strong Russian accent, said, could I please hold the paintbrush? And I thought, oh my God, you know, he's going to slash it, or I don't know what he was going to do. And I said, well, can you tell me why you want to do that? I am gynecolog, you know. And so I said, okay, all right, I'll take a photo of you. And then I said, but you have to tell me what you think. In your professional opinion, is this woman pregnant, right? So I had this expert right there. So he's doing he's posing for the photograph. I said, so have a look. And he's really looking at Courbet's painting. And he goes, niet. So, you know, that was his opinion. So, but that was also before they discovered who the real model was, and she was not pregnant. So anyway, that was there was some very fun highlights as I was doing my copiste. So let's go on to the next one. Is there another one, Natasha? Okay, so every day as a copiste, an artist room, and you,
Somebody does.
I would have to go down all the corridors to the downstairs, dragging my easel behind me, and it was you get a lot of looks. I can tell you that much.
Did anyone just gasp? Because I think I heard somebody gasp. So yeah.
Yes, you know, it's not just like you're copying a landscape or a portrait. You know, you're going through the museum with this painting. It was kind of hilarious. Anyway, okay, I see somebody's asking questions, but we'll get to that later, but it's a good one. Why didn't you cover it to protect it? Because it was still wet. You know, this was when I would go after a painting session back down to the artist room, where you had a place to put your painting and your easel, etc. So, okay, let's do the next slide. So this was my finished copy, which I'm pretty proud of. And the directrice at the Bureau de Copiste, she really, really loved it. She said she never imagined I would do such a good job. So I really feel good about it. Let's go on to the next one. Let's see, Natasha.
Okay. Sorry, there must be a connection thing because I do change them straight away, but I guess you just need to wait a couple of seconds. Sorry about that.
Okay, so I'll just wait. I'm a very impatient person. I'll just wait nicely. Sorry. So on the very last day, I write this in the book, on the very last day of my painting session, I still had a few things to do, and it was the last day that I had my, authority to copy. And this total stranger came up to me and he just said, you've got to see this, you've got to see this, you've got to come with me afterwards. And I said, I don't know who you are. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm busy now. Anyway, he left me his card. He was a journalist. And he said, you're just not going to believe this. So I actually did meet him near the Place de la République. And there was this billboard of L'Origine du Monde made of chocolate, bread, and cheese. It was just like, I just was standing there. I couldn't believe it. The next slide will show you what it looked like up close.
Oh, wow.
You see?
Yeah.
So,
oh, this is cheese. This is like, I just realized that.
Yeah, and there was bread, chocolate, and cheese. This was a billboard. I think it's on the Rue Oberkampf, and it changes like every month. It changes every month for new artists. So the bread really didn't get a chance to, get too moldy or anything like that. But to be honest, I broke off a little piece of chocolate. I felt I deserved it. And I still have that piece of chocolate. So anyway, Natasha, was that slide 11? Because if so, then I'll go back to speaking with Sarah.
Yeah. So what made you decide to write a book about L'Origine du Monde, about that?
Right. So while I was copying, and I must admit, even though I'm an artist, I didn't really know much about that painting. I was just struck more by the image, and I felt it sort of segued really well into what I was trying to explore in my art, which was my own sexuality. And, I felt very empowered after finishing this experience. And I got home and I said, okay, so I started reading more and more about the painting, and I just could not believe this painting's story. It is as unbelievable as the painting itself. And I said, oh my goodness, I just kept reading, and I became absolutely obsessed. I mean, you have to be obsessed if you do something for 10 years. I became absolutely obsessed to tell the painting's story to people beyond the art world. Okay, there are literally scores of books about Courbet, about the painting, and Thierry Savatier, he actually followed in those footsteps, but they're all done in either academic or biographical way. There isn't a novel that sort of fictionalizes based on fact the entire story of this painting and the unbelievable people whose paths it crossed. So I thought, okay, and I wanted to do it in English because a lot of people outside of France are not familiar with this painting. So I just became absolutely obsessed with telling the story. And I do confess to falling in love with Gustave Courbet as well.
You did fall in love with Gustave Courbet.
Totalement. I mean, absolutely.
That's interesting.
Absolutely.
So the book in itself is hard to classify because it's fictionalized, but it's a historical fiction, and it's highly researched. Most of the characters and places and names are in fact real. following really the real history of the painting as it changed from hands to hands, of all different owners over 2 centuries. So how did you go about your research, and how did you work out what bits to invent?
Okay, so I really did an enormous amount of research. I must have read about 30 books in French and English. I must have read hundreds of internet sites until, and I had this huge piece of sort of timeline around my studio where I would say, oh, this happened here and this happened here. But of course, sometimes the trail went cold because you're talking about over a century and a half, and it was hidden for that entire time. So the trail went cold sometimes, and it was not clear how it got from point A to point B. So I didn't just like sit there and go, oh, I think I'm going to just make this up. I tried to find any connection between point A and point B, people that were involved in point A, the people that were involved in point B, and said he might have known this one, or they were in the same Legion, the French Legion, or something like that. And so I made a connection so that the arc of the story could flow, but it is very, very possible that these things happened. I really tried not to just be totally fanciful about it. Mm-hmm. Although, there are 1 or 2 moments when I did have fun with it. If you remember, Sarah, the gentleman who met his fate in a very sort of embarrassing way in front of.
Yes, that was quite impressive. Actually, it reminded me of a moment in real French political history, because we had a president, Paul Doumer, I think, who died in the arms of his mistress. So I thought, oh, this is amazing. There was a connection with French political history. So was that a real fact, or was that one of the inventions?
That was obviously an invention because I was not in the room at the time. But because of the way that the gentleman's widow continued with that, I realized something pretty nasty must have happened. So I made that up. Yeah.
That's funny. So you are both an artist and a writer focused on writing about art. So which came first? How does one inform the other?
I am one of those cliche people that, they say I was an artist from the moment I was born. I really just loved art. I was always drawing. And just recently I found, when I was cleaning out my mom's house, I found like a little sort of a report card from my kindergarten teacher in France. And she wrote, Lilianne est très douée. She's very talented. So I thought, okay, I went along with that. So I've always been an artist, even though I have to say my parents did not encourage that. So art came first, but I always did like to write. And so it was a natural progression to write about the arts. And then this painting came into my life, and it just was a sort of a fait accompli. It just had to happen. It just had to happen. But also, don't forget, like when I was the copiste, it was, of course, I was relating to people at the museum and talking lots and lots of people. But the actual art aspect of it, I learned a lot about, Courbet's method and his brush strokes, and he used a lot of palette knife. It was just like a really exciting, intense exercise for me, an artist. So this painting has given me everything, the art experience and the literary experience.
Mm-hmm. So let's go a little bit to Courbet, and then I have more questions, and we'll go back to your writing style in a minute. But I understand you have what we call in English a fondness, but in French we would say un petit faible pour Gustave Courbet. So tell us about him a little bit.
Okay, so Courbet is a very interesting character, and I didn't know much about him. I would say that 19th century painters were not. I was more into like a 20th century paint book here, which I always love to show, which is like huge. it's the collected letters of Gustave Courbet. Letters of Gustave Courbet. It's a 700-page book, and he was very prolific. It's his letters over 40 years collected. Okay. I started reading this, and I just could not believe this guy. He was, I don't think he realized how very defiant, knew who he was from a very early age. He was boisterous. He was sort of very provincial. He was crazy, liked to drink. He liked to womanize. But his art, there's nothing more important than his art. And he was very, very connected to his family. He loved his mother, but he would go on these binges. He raged against the government. He found his own path in art. He went against all the institutions. He made a lot of enemies. And once you read the book, you'll see that actually he had a very, very sad ending. It was a very sad, wasn't it, Sarah?
Yeah, it was very sad. Yeah, it was extremely sad.
A very sad ending. He really didn't deserve to have an ending like that. But so I'd just like to read a few sentences from some letters to give you a sense. This is when he was, his family had sent him to a college in Besançon. He was 18 and he didn't want any of it. And he kept writing them letters. I'm going to run away. I can't stand this. This is a waste of time. You know, you're wasting your money. Anyway, it sort of was a precursor of the type of person he was. Dear family, I was touched by the letter you wrote me, but I cannot stay, no matter what. Besides, if I stayed, I would be losing a year and you would be losing 1,000 francs. You might as well throw them in the water. Since I've been here, I have not yet opened a book. I cannot do a thing. No one gives a damn about me. Everyone tells me I cannot keep up. By always wanting to do better than others, you make me lose my diploma. Everyone is prejudiced against me. It's pointless to consider. If I'm to be an exception to every rule in every way, I'm off to pursue my destiny. This is like he's 18, you know, and he's just like, I'm ready to throw it all in. I've got my own destiny to pursue, and I'm going to do that. Then he writes, when he became, he was one of, what's really interesting about Courbet is he really was one of the first artists to have this instinctual understanding of how to promote his art and what it takes to, just like today, what does it take to, out of the thousands of artists, because at that time, thousands of artists flocked to Paris. How do you stand out? Even today, how do you stand out? Normally, it's to be eccentric, to have shocking work, or something like that. And he understood that. And so he played on his provinciality, that people would make fun of him at first, but he said, no, I'm going to go all the way. I'm going to be this provincial bore in Paris, and they're going to remember me, and I'm going to paint paintings of everyday people. I'm not going to paint what they do at the academy. So he says here, I have just embarked on the great wandering and independent life of the Bohemian. Don't think that this is a whim. I have thought about it for a long time. Moreover, it is serious duty, not only to give an example of freedom and character in art, but also to publicize the art that I undertake. I mean, he was very like, it was pretty amazing to me. And on that same subject, I'll read one more excerpt where he says here, oh yeah. In past years, when I had less of a style of my own and was still painting somewhat like them, meaning all other artists, they accepted me. But now that I am myself, I can no longer expect that. He didn't care. He knew that the establishment would go against him, that the Paris Salon would not accept his work. And he, you know what he did? He opened his own gallery for the first time. And he charged people to come in. I mean, he just was ahead of his time. And I found him fascinating and you know, totally attractive in that sort of sense. Just a person who really knew who he was, wasn't afraid.
So what has been the most rewarding outcome for you of writing L'Origine?
Okay, so first of all, I'm delighted I finally finished after 10 years. And actually, yesterday I ended up, just as a little aside, it was 10 years, and I said, okay, I've got to get it out there. So what does one do? Normally, you go and you try to get a literary agent, which is, they say, getting a literary agent is harder than winning the lottery.
Mhm.
But anyway, I worked on that for 6 months. I got a literary agent in New York, and I decided after working with them for a few months, maybe I'm too much like Courbet. I wanted to go my own way. I didn't want to be told what the cover would be. I didn't want to be told that I should put the front at the back or the back of the front, the chapters. And I just really felt very strongly that I wanted to get the book out in this way, the way that I wrote it. And I went and I pursued my own self-publishing route. And yesterday I was offered a publishing contract to reissue the book in September under this new publisher. So I'm very, very pleased about that.
This is very interesting.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a. Oui?
I'm sorry, I have a couple of slides about Gustave Courbet. Do you want me to show them now?
Yes, I forgot about them. Thanks so much, Natasha. Before we move on, yeah.
Okay, so we just went through that one. Yes, can you see it now?
It's the chart. Right. So here on the left, of course, is Gustave Courbet, and there's Johnny Depp. And everyone who's read my book, they say, "Oh my God, this has to be a movie, and Johnny Depp has to play Gustave Courbet."
I was going to say exactly that.
So we better hurry because. I mean, look at this. I mean, it's amazing, no? I mean, in my opinion. Okay, Natasha, next. So one of the highlights of my research was going to the archives, being allowed to go to the archives at the University of Maryland. They purchased an entire stash of personal correspondence from Gustave Courbet. And of course, I had read all his letters more than once. And to sit there, with the white gloves on and everything, and actually hold his letters, I actually had tears in my eyes. I mean, it was just something that you can't imagine. If you get so deep into a subject, it's amazing. Okay, next. So this was in that stash. It was where he used to buy his art supplies, and a lot of the artists in Paris at the time bought their art supplies here. So he had, various invoices. It was really fascinating. That afternoon was fantastic. Next one. Yes. So this was him when he was, before he was in exile, and he put on a lot of weight. And so a lot of the cartoonists would characterize him like this. You see how he's got his nose up in the air. He was very arrogant. He said, I am Gustave Courbet and I can do this and I can do that. He was arrogant, and he used to like to say how wonderful he was. But this particular cartoon, somebody apparently had asked him, the cartoonist or the newspaper said, "We would like to print this. Is that okay with you?" And he says, "I don't own this. I don't own anything. So, just go ahead. I don't care." I found that like really wonderful. He really lived his principles, So wow. There was one more thing. I know I haven't answered Sarah's question because I forgot it already.
What was about the most rewarding thing about writing L'Origine?
The most rewarding thing is, and if anyone who's watching tonight reads the book, the most rewarding thing is having a dialogue with readers and seeing what spoke to them and what they liked about it and how they view the painting now. That has been the most rewarding thing, because I have to share something on Instagram. This one woman reached out to me and she said, I can't tell you, this was unbelievable. She said, "I just read your book. You've saved my life." And I thought, a book about Gustave Courbet, what do you mean? I thought that's a little bit of an exaggeration. Well, apparently she had been terribly, terribly burned in her pubic and torso area, terribly burned. And she was in hospital for months. And she hated herself. And she was embarrassed when, because all these students and nurses and doctors would have to have a look at her. And somehow she got hold of my book and she read my book and she said, "You changed my life. I am not embarrassed about myself anymore. I see myself as a woman. I can't thank you enough." To me, that was worth every minute of those 10 years. It's really unbelievable, that sort of connection. And what about Sarah, when you told me about your personal connections with some of the people in the book?
Right,
namely Jacques.
That was quite surprising for me, because I don't want to reveal too much about the book, but this is a question where I will say that the last owner was none other than the Pope of psychoanalysis, not Freud, but the French one, Jacques Lacan. And that was, for me, that was really a big surprise, because in my the university studies in the 80s, just about when he died, Jacques Lacan, what we used to do, and I didn't study art or anything like that. Okay, I don't pretend to be an artist. I do collect, but I'm not an artist myself. And so I was studying law and psychoanalysis, and one of my professor at the Faculty of Law in Toulouse had been one of Jacques Lacan's patients. And I saw the transformation of this guy when he went through his psychoanalysis, and until he became, 4 or 5 years later when I was doing my master, because he had completely changed personality. And with my friends at university, and even after that, after I did my Master of Philosophy in Political Science, we were still doing those famous seminars, those Lacan seminars. We were dissecting text, all the way from the Bible to other texts in a Jacques Lacan, in a Lacanian way, which was really, really something that I'm still applying nowadays when I teach actually cinema or literature sometimes. But the funniest thing was taking my verbal exam for the master, for the final exam in international law, which the teacher was teaching the former Lacan client, and he was teaching us international aviation law as well as international relations, and he had a chapter on the famous kiss between Honecker and Brezhnev, which he had analyzed in a Lacanian way. And then another one about getting the coulisses and so to say of the hijacking of an airplane, and how he was looking to an airplane as basically a vagina, okay, as people coming out and the hostages and etc. And I was fascinated, and so the rest of my friends in law, they were not as fascinated as I was by all his imagination and his interpretation rather, and so they didn't really study for the subject, and I studied really hard for the subject. Comes the day of the exam, he asked me something, and it was all about, again, the airplane at hijack. And I ended up quoting the famous Jacques Lacan, Le nom du père, the metaphor of the name of the father. And so the teacher, I was the last one to come, I think, to take the exam, and he looked at me and he says, "Where did you hear about that?" And so I told him about the seminars that I was doing besides university, and so he gave me the highest mark possible, because I was the one student who had named his god, basically.
Exactly. But he was considered a god by his, the people who took analysis with him, and it's really remarkable in this story in the novel how he becomes one of the collectors.
I know it's impressive, and that's why I want to ask. So how did you find out about the real people and the?
Well, I have to say, like I said, there's a lot of information out there in bits and pieces. So this was known about Jacques Lacan, because I don't want to give too much away of the book, but that's how it eventually ended up in the Musée d'Orsay. But what I wanted to say because I really want to hear also some questions, but I wanted to one more slide I wanted to talk about how this painting, okay, it was painted in 1866, but you would not believe the amount of artists in our contemporary art world who have been inspired by this painting. You know, they didn't necessarily go and copy it, but they have sort of riffed on it. And there's been some very, very famous artists who have done incredible works around L'Origine du Monde. And when I got back, I also continued. I thought how I felt so connected to the painting that I wanted to do I wanted to create a work that incorporated the painting I just copied and the feeling that I got after being the copiste, that the painting was me and I was the painting, as l'origine c'est moi. Mm-hmm. So Natasha, could you show that last piece that I did? It's a installation piece.
Oh, wow.
So this is the piece. So I took photographs, you know, of my body and sort of deconstructed. And this piece is called L'Origine c'est moi. And so that the copy is, of course, the real copy, the painting, and the rest are sort of bits and pieces of body parts that sort of make the whole. You know, it's the whole thing about, you know, the parts are, you know, what's that expression? The parts are greater than the whole, or something like that. What is that expression? Yeah.
Les parties sont plus grandes que l'intégration. I can't remember exactly the phrase in French.
Right.
But that's what you mean, yeah.
Right. So
plus importantes que les parties sont plus importantes.
The parts are greater than the sum. The sum of the parts is greater than the whole, or something like this. So, and then, okay, you can take that piece off. Thank you. So I just wanted to sort of conclude about the other artists. It's not only artists that have been inspired to do something creative with L'Origine du Monde. Just this morning, I received a very unexpected poem that somebody found in a book. It was a poem by John Updike, and it features L'Origine. And I'd like to read the first two stanzas of it because he really gets to this fantastic point. The poem itself, if you're under 18, hold your ears. The title of the poem is you know, okay, I'm warning you. The title of the poem is Two Cunts in Paris. Excusez-moi. But anyway, that was from John Updike. But let me read you the first two stanzas. It's not very long. Although stone nudes are commonplace, some crammed two to a column, supple caryatids and others mooning in the Tuileries, the part that makes them women is the last revelation allowed to art. The male equipment, less concealable, is seen since ancient times. A triune thingumbob. Courbet's oil, L'Origine du Monde, was owned by Madame Jacques Lacan, and through some tax shenanigans became the Musée d'Orsay. Go see it there. Beneath the pubic bush, a matted Rorschach blot. Beneath blanched thighs of a fat and bridal docility, a curved and rosy closure says ici. Is that not incredible?
It's wonderful. I always love John Updike, so.
I mean, but also to call it a Rorschach after I read this poem, I thought the painting itself is a Rorschach because everyone sees something different in it, right?
Yes.
Everyone finds something different in that painting. So it in itself, not just the pubic bush looks like a Rorschach, but it's really in the eye of the beholder how you see the painting. So I thought that was just an amazing poem.
So we have a couple of questions in the chat, and I will try to go back to one of the first questions.
Yeah, the first one was from Theodora Salo, I think, right?
Yes, yeah.
And so I'll read it out. Sorry if you want.
Go ahead, read it because I didn't find it there.
Yeah, I have it in front of my eyes. So a question from Theodora: would you have been equally uncomfortable painting in public had it been a different painting, like a landscape or something less intimate? Is it the subject or the nature of the creative act that made you uncomfortable with the audience?
It's such a great question. That's really a great question. I think the subject made me particularly uncomfortable because I myself felt exposed. And, in the art world, we talk about the male gaze. This painting was painted for the male gaze. And here I was, a woman gazing at the painting, and people were looking at me, and I felt like I was exposed. So in that sense, the subject made me uncomfortable. But also, I had never done anything like this before. I'd never wanted to paint in public. I'm not comfortable with that. But somehow I found it in myself to do that. So it's really a little bit of both, if that answers the question. Yeah.
To piggyback on that one, and I had a question on that, because throughout your book, basically, whenever the painting, and we can imagine it's part fiction and part history, part reality, whenever the painting is shown by their owners to some of his male friends, a lot of them are actually shocked. And I was wondering whether men had more of an issue with the depiction of women's genitals, and I'm talking about the genitals under the belt, especially when one compares to the abundance of sculpture of a male nude, and whether men probably have less of a problem when it's come to depiction of breast, whether that scares them less or that reminds them of motherhood. Is there an issue with the women's genitals below the belt?
I would say it's like I sort of became an expert because I spoke to so many people when I was there. And I would say it's sort of like there were two camps. There were some men that said, oh, it's beautiful, it should be shown. A lot of the men, I'd say, to generalize, I would say that the younger men said that they did not find the painting in any way erotic because they needed a face and eyes to go along with it. The older gentlemen, I found, did find it erotic, or at least they told me they did. So there was that, okay? But also with the women, I found that the women thought it more beautiful than the men on the whole, from what they were imparting with me. They just found it very beautiful. They were happy to see it there. But, again, feminist art criticism, it really hates this painting, or from what I've read, many art criticisms don't like this painting. They see it as, it's exploitative. Other people say, no, at last, here it is in a gold frame, as it is in nature. We're not hiding anything. So again, the Rorschach, you just can see what you want in it.
Melanie had a comment which was very interesting. I thought she said her daughter had to paint the breast of naked women without the nipples for the high school art class. The teacher would have been fired if she had permitted it. So this is very real, obviously, l'origine. There are people who just don't get it. That's something that's been, and so Melanie's question to that was, how did the painting survive destruction? It could have been destroyed. How did it survive destruction?
Well, first of all, read the book. The answer is, and what's so fascinating, what got me to write the book, is the painting was hidden for about 150 years. And I think if it hadn't been hidden, and it did have some close calls, believe me, but if it hadn't been hidden, that would have been a problem because it was so controversial. And it does incite such strong emotion. So there's your answer, because it was hidden. So once it's within the sort of venerable walls of the Orsay Museum, it is safe now, and it finally has a home. But it was hidden, so that's why it survived all those years.
Melanie is wondering why John Updike used the word cunt to shock, because she thinks it's a horrible word for the best part of being a woman.
Well, it's John Updike. What can I say?
We can't. I mean, it's a bit like asking Philip Roth about noise complaint, really, and John Updike about that.
I don't know if men have I find as a woman, I don't like that term. I don't know if there's any men in the audience here. If that term is as difficult for a man to say, I find it very difficult as a woman to say that word, as I'm not comfortable with that word. So I don't know.
Natasha,
I have a new question here.
Yeah.
I was wondering the same actually. So Diane is asking, I have the book here, but I haven't yet read, but I'm wondering, has the painting ever gone on tour as part of an exhibition? And also wondering if you saw any differences in reactions to the painting, especially between French and Americans, since Americans are considered to be more puritanical about the body.
Yes, there's two great parts to this question. I'll start with the last one and talk about the exhibiting after. So the Americans that I came across, and it was a constant flow of visitors to this particular painting. So I saw, I did find that the Americans did not really appreciate it. Some Americans even said to me, it doesn't belong in a museum. So I felt I became the painting's protector. I had sort of stick up for the painting and sort of talk about it, why it should be there and what was important about the painting. So I did find that a few of the Americans I spoke to, just did not appreciate it. But that goes into a very interesting thing. I just said that it was hidden for 150 years. The very first time it was shown in public, and I don't want to give away too much in the book, was of all places at the Brooklyn Museum. And there's a really interesting, story about how was it first shown ever in public in the Brooklyn Museum in the 1980s. So I'm not going to give any more away, but as far as it doesn't travel very often, the painting, and it has traveled to the Musée Gustave Courbet in his hometown of Ornans. It has been shown there. And I think it was shown in the Petit Palais once in a Courbet retrospective, but it doesn't travel very often.
Mm.
So.
Somebody had actually that was one of my other questions about that, because about something in the book that was mentioned, and I thought about Eve Ensler's The Vagina Monologues actually while reading your book as well. And so somebody said that she had become comfortable with the C word, cunt, since watching the Vagina Monologues, and I read the monologues and I saw it on a play, so that was quite an experience, not for me as a European, but to look at the reaction of some of the members of the public. It was very interesting. And then my daughter, attending also it at the University of Maine, they put it as a performance with some of the theater students, and she said it was interesting to see the reaction of the public, and that was only a few years ago. Okay, she just graduated in 2017. Is there any other questions? There's a lot of comments. Melanie commenting about the fact she doesn't like the word boob, and that she doesn't like any of the words. That the class was with live models, and she said it was the daughter said it was amazing to draw and paint the flesh. And as for the nipples, Melanie told her daughter to wait until she graduated and to paint them in. The teacher had to do what she had to do in the face of some really uptight parents. So my question would be for you, Lilianne, following up on Melanie's really important comment, why would really uptight parents sign up their kids for an art class, which will deprive the other art students of the full experience?
That is, a question for the ages, because I mean, how ridiculous is that? There was some comedian, I forget, a late night TV show host, who was talking about there was an image with a woman and a bit of her nipple or something like that, and he was threatened to get off the air. And remember that whole wardrobe fiasco with the Super Bowl? I mean, what is that? I mean, don't ask me. That sounds absolutely ridiculous. I have no answer for that. I can't understand it. It's ridiculous. It's part of the body. I mean, I just don't understand it at all. But I saw somebody's comment saying there was nothing, I don't know who it was, but someone said there was nothing shocking, but she saw beauty and mystery, which is what I said, that most women who spoke to me said, oh, how beautiful, how I see a lot of beauty there. That was a fairly common reaction I found from women, except for young women. Young women hated the hair. They could not get over the hair. It was just unbelievable. They said, "Oh, it's dégueulasse, c'est dégueulasse." And I thought, well, if you didn't go get it waxed, I mean, But it was really interesting that so many young women were put off by it. And I'm not just talking American, I'm talking about European women as well, young ones.
Well, actually, that was a question I would almost have had for you regarding the content of your book, because the original owner for whom the commission, I mean, the painting was commissioned, he paid. It was a Turkish diplomat, so therefore with a Middle Eastern upbringing. And in the Middle Eastern tradition, women are fully waxed. And so I thought that was very interesting. That it was, the
but
painting.
There he was. I mean, Courbet painted it in Paris, and in Paris, they were not hairless. And this Turkish diplomat was very, very taken with French women and with the sort of more laissez-faire attitude to sex. And I think he just absolutely loved it. It was for him something very different and something very erotic in his mind, coming from, the East.
Annie has a question. Are you working on a next book, and is it about a painting? And I will ask, are you working on a painting as well?
Yeah, I'm constantly working on my art, but this entire time, this 6 months since my book has been out, it has been a whirlwind, of podcasts and events, and it's been very exciting sharing this with people. But only in the last month have I been ready to sort of say, okay, my baby, you're on your way. And I've given myself some mental time to think about something, and I love to write. And there's a couple of projects in the works, and one of them is a children's book called Monsieur Pourquoi Pas. And it was inspired by somebody I met on an artist residency 2 years ago, when I got an artist residency in Hyères in Provence. And I met somebody that inspired me, and I thought I would write a children's book about it. So there's a lot of different projects going on. But I wanted to say something, just going back to that whole nipple thing and the art class. And I'm just thinking to myself that it sort of says a lot about where we are as a society right now, right? Because when the painting was shown at the Brooklyn Museum in the 1980s, it was a different time, and it didn't create such a stir, believe it or not. I think it would create a lot more opposition if it was shown today. The public. I think they'd have a lot more signs up, and they'd have a lot of, beware, beware of the bush. I really think that it's a sign of the times in a way.
Wasn't there? Dora has a question. She was raising a hand. I see that.
Yes, and I was hoping I can ask this on Zoom rather than typing, because it's a little long. But I've noticed as both a European and an American that discussions about the body differ enormously in Europe and in America, in America, the emphasis being on how does this make you feel? And this is especially in the context of appropriate and inappropriate, especially when it comes to educating the younger generation. What is an appropriate touch? What is inappropriate? But if the emphasis is on how does this make you feel versus in Europe, what do you think about this? Which is a far more rational exercise. What do you think about this? How does it make you feel? And I'm not surprised that you got questions like answers like it's disgusting, because that is the kind of answer that comes to mind when feelings rather than reason are the center of the conversation. So I think there is a big disconnect, and the switch, the deliberate switch in at the same time educating younger generations about what is appropriate and what is inappropriate about their bodies versus, you know, what do you think about the body generally? And when you place this in the context of art, I took my son to the National Gallery of Art, and one of his first reactions was, why are there so many naked bodies around here? This is inappropriate. It's you know, it made him extremely uncomfortable, and he was 7 years old, I'd say, at the time. So I think that this emphasis we have in contemporary discourse on feelings rather than reason really, you know, gets displaced into art. And perhaps that's why, you know, these reactions, it's discussed.
That's an amazing point. That is such a broad point. And as you were talking, I remember now the classes that would come in, sit on the floor in front of L'Origine du Monde with their teacher, right? Perhaps they were maybe 13, 14 years old. There were a few giggles, but nothing much. And I remember the discussion, exactly as you say, the way that the teachers approached and what the questions they asked their students, their French students. You know, why do you think about this title? You know, what does it tell you? What was Courbet doing with this? It wasn't like, you know, are you grossed out by this, or are you, you know, shocked by this? You're absolutely right. I mean, it's a really good point. Yeah.
Melanie, you have a question, I think.
Well, I just think that the painting was hidden for many years. I think it does evoke emotions on the other side of the pond too. I mean, L'Origine du Monde was the origin of the world. I mean, babies are born through the birth canal. This is where they come out, folks. You know, it's kind of like, it's just so very frank and, you know, out there. And so what we really have a hard time here in the States is discerning between what is a degrading or, you know, pornographic versus what is beauty and art, you know. And so like even like the bare-breasted women over in the Capitol and all those statues, you know, the goddesses of democracy and all that, you know, some women and some people have been saying we should take those down because they're naked, you know. And it's a constant battle to get people to understand beauty in art and inspiration in art. And so this is a discussion, and it's impossible to do at the high school level here in the States. Impossible.
Really?
You can't. It's just as closed. You know, and Miss the teacher, I'm not gonna say her name, and I'm not gonna say the school. She was very good with my daughter, and I said, well, you know, I wouldn't be upset if she painted nipples, and because I let her take the anatomy class at, you know, the art class at the Smithsonian, you know, at the age of 16. That's kind of young, but she was ready. She was asking. And she said, Mom, I got to see the tendons and the muscles and how the skin ripples. And it's so alive, you know. And so this was a very important step in her development as an artist. And so I guess I just feel like, how can we get people to understand? You know, I mean, this group here is very well cultivated and educated. But I mean, these are supposed professional parents, you know. And
no, it's really remarkable. I mean, like you say, but it all goes back to the fall of man and the whole puritanical, you know, Judeo-Christian history that we have, and I think that this country finds it very hard to let go of that.
Well, I just think that men are just so totally fearful of the power of women to give life and give birth. That this is what this says. It shouts in all its beauty and grandeur and animality with the hair, you know. It's like, it's just so out there. It's great. It's fantastic.
Yeah, exactly.
I love it.
We have two questions there, but one is from a former president of Alliance Française board of directors who just reminded me that we made an invitation for the annual gala of the Alliance Française when Gérard Haro was ambassador, and his partner Pascal Blondeau is a photographer, and he has made photos, and the one we chose for the invitation to the annual gala of the Alliance Française was the lady in red, which in fact was a mannequin. It was not a real lady, and she obviously had a red dress on, and the mannequin, you know, they always have sort of the nipples sort of erect, and people were shocked because of the invitation was showing a nipple. But there was a very interesting question from Diane. She was wondering if there was any connection between this painting, L'Origine du Monde, and Marcel Duchamp, Étant donné. And,
yes, apparently, yes, because the painting, even though it was hidden, at some point in the 50s, somebody had produced a very, very poor sort of a reproduction of it. It wasn't the same sort of, it was L'Origine du Monde, but it wasn't sort of like a reproduction that showed the way that Courbet did it. And it was in black and white, and it was produced in a book. And apparently Marcel Duchamp was very influenced by that. So yes, I mean, you look at the two and, you know, so talking about the artists that have been inspired by it, it goes back quite a ways, not only contemporary artists, but whoever's seen it has really, I think it's, there's an artist, I think her name is, I don't know her first name, Trockel. She's a German artist, and I saw her work at the New Museum in New York. And she had a piece of, she had L'Origine du Monde, a photocopy of L'Origine du Monde on a canvas. And instead of the pubic bush, she put this humongous, hairy, giant spider. And it was really shocking to see. But I think compared to what somebody, I forgot who was talking about it, you know, I think that it scares men. You know, this part of the anatomy is very scary because there's so much power there, and it's all about creation and the power that women have. So it was a very stunning piece.
There is a comment, a very good comment by Diane. She thank you for your explanation, and she says, remember seeing the Duchamp in Philadelphia, understanding voyeurism so well. The Courbet makes us voyeurs too, but perhaps as women looking on, we reclaim the male gaze. That's a good point.
Yes, and that's how I felt, and I think I even I think in the second or third paragraph of my book, I say I was staring at this painting and I was not the only voyeur. I definitely felt like a voyeur, which I got over after 6 weeks of staring at it. Because but it was definitely this male gaze, female gaze, you know, where was I in this equation? Because people were looking at me, looking at the painting. There's a lot going on in this entire intersection of this equation. It was very, very interesting.
I have one last question. I don't know if anybody has one, but I have one last question because I remember a few years ago, I think it was in DC, but there was someone who attacked a painting. And please, any of you, if you're have been in DC for as long as I have in the last 26 years, but you know, I think somebody attacked a painting in DC, but for the sake of me, I cannot remember which painting it was. At the National Gallery of Art. Does anyone remember that? Somebody attacking a painting for a woman, I think it was a woman actually, come in and attacking a painting in DC.
I remember it, but I don't remember which one it was either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
No. Well, I really want to recommend Diane's book again, not only for the story, but for the Origine du Monde, for the art. I love art. I also love Gustave Courbet, and not only for that painting, but also for itself, because it's so beautifully written. It's a delight. It's like a gem. You know, it's the full kinetic experience. She appeals to all the senses. When you read a book, and you can hear, you can smell, you can taste, you can touch, you can see. So it's a fabulous book. So I really recommend it. It's at Bonjour Books in Kensington, Maryland, the tiny little bookstore in which you can find some books in French or about France. So I really highly recommend it, and you can order it online as well. Jennifer at Bonjour Books, she has a curbside pickup. If you order the book, she'll tell you it will be ready by the door of the shop, you know, outside. So that's what I did when I got my book. So really, really, it will be one of the most not only entertaining, because the word entertaining, it can be so, you know, negative. It's not that. It's you want the story to finish. You know, you will want it to go on. You want to learn more about Gustave Courbet. You want to learn more about Lilianne's art and approach and an art aesthetics and a theory, a philosophy of art as well. So and you'll enjoy it because it's beautifully written. It's beautifully written.
Merci beaucoup, Sarah. And I want to just thank you all for spending a bit of your Friday night with us. And please, if you do read the book, leave a review. I just love to have that connection with my readers. And like Sarah said, you can buy it on Amazon and all that, but it's wonderful to be able to support a local bookstore like Jennifer's Bonjour Books, especially, you know, that she's has so many French books there. But she was one of the first bookseller to actually put them in her store. And we had a wonderful discussion event with her as well. But anyway, I enjoyed this tremendously. I loved your questions. I thank you again from the bottom of my heart for spending the time with me. And thank you, Alliance Française of DC.
You're welcome.
And it was a pleasure. This was really a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Lilianne.
Thank you. Good night.
Have a good weekend,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Bye, everyone. Goodbye.
You are
Bye.
fantastic. Thank you.